At our wedding, my husband's sister stood up and said, "You're marrying him for his money, everyone knows it." My parents looked stunned, and my fiancé just sat there smiling. I stood, smoothed my dress, and said, "Then I guess you won't mind when I pull out the prenup you secretly signed last year as his power of attorney." Her jaw dropped. If I could tell you the exact moment I knew the wedding wasn't just about us, it would be the second I saw Paloma walk into the venue. Everything had been calm that morning. I'd woken up early, before the others, the mountains outside our Airbnb still cloaked in morning fog. It had rained a bit overnight, and everything smelled like pine and wet stone. Peaceful, almost sacred. My mom was humming in the kitchen, helping my sister zip her dress, everyone tiptoeing around as if volume might shatter the day. But that peace was thin as glass, and deep down, I knew it. I just didn't know why yet. Paloma showed up late, of course. Made a dramatic entrance, her heels echoing on the wooden floor, her hair immaculately curled like she was arriving at a photoshoot instead of her brother's wedding. Burgundy dress, low-cut, silk that shimmered under the lights just enough to make it clear she intended to be seen. She walked in like she owned the place. And all eyes went to her. She hugged Ash with a stiff pat, whispered something in his ear. I caught the brief flinch in his expression, so fast no one else would have seen it unless they were watching closely. I was. Always had been, with her. The thing about Paloma is she doesn't explode. She seeps. She poisons slowly, with smiles and, "I'm just being honest," comments, until everyone's too uncomfortable to stay but too polite to leave. I'd spent the last year navigating her minefield. I didn't trust her. She didn't pretend to like me. We kept it civil, for Ash. I should have known civility wouldn't last through the wedding. Ash had told me, once, months ago, during one of our late-night wine and pizza talks, that Paloma had always struggled with control. That growing up, she'd been their father's shadow, his favorite, the one who knew how to schmooze bankers before she could legally drive. When their dad passed and Ash got majority say in the family trust, it cracked something in her. She never forgave him. She never trusted anyone who might sway him from the family's path. That's who I was to her. A stranger. A threat. And worst of all, not one of them. Still, the ceremony had gone beautifully, for the most part. The venue we chose was a renovated barn in the hills outside Asheville. White chairs, twinkle lights hanging from old wooden beams, flowers arranged by a woman named Deb who ran a florist shop out of a trailer near Black Mountain. It was simple, heartfelt, nothing extravagant. That's how we wanted it. Real. My dad walked me down the aisle. My knees shook so badly I was sure I'd fall. Ash looked at me the way he always did, like I was the first person he'd ever seen. That look steadied me. My heart, my breath. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of us. Then the officiant asked the age-old question. If anyone objects, and Paloma stood. Just stood. I heard the scrape of her chair, and for a split second, I thought she was getting up to go to the restroom or check on something. But then she turned to face the crowd. I didn't even hear the first few words. Everything around me slowed, warped, as though my body was bracing for an accident. I remember the air in the barn suddenly feeling too tight, too full. I remember my mom's hand gripping the edge of her seat. She said I was marrying for money. That it was obvious. That she had warned Ash, and no one listened. She made a show of looking around the room, inviting everyone to question what they were celebrating. She didn't scream. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she delivered her lines with a calm, cruel edge. Like someone stating the weather. I should have cried. Or shouted. I think people expected that. But something ancient and icy came over me. I looked at her, not as a sister-in-law, not as the woman trying to embarrass me at the altar, but as the ticking time bomb she had always been. And in that moment, I realized I didn't have to play defense. I stepped forward. I smoothed my dress, slowly, letting silence return. Then I said just one thing. If that's how you feel, I said quietly, then I suppose you won't mind what I brought with me. I reached beneath the small white chair where I had placed my clutch earlier that morning. I pulled out the cream envelope. Unfolded the paper with careful fingers. The sound echoed in the quiet barn like thunder. And then I held it up, not to her, but to the officiant, to the guests, to the room. This is a notarized prenup agreement, I said. It protects both Ash and me. And it was signed, by her, as his legal proxy last year. There was a pause in the room that felt like holding your breath underwater. Her lips parted. For once, she had no words. I didn't need to explain the rest. I didn't need to bring up the winery, or how she had breezed into the attorney's office tipsy and smug, mocking the paperwork ritual, while scribbling her name across the lines. I didn't need to mention how Ash had wanted everything in writing from the start, just in case. The room had already turned. People looked at her now with a different kind of silence. Not discomfort. Disapproval. Ash finally stood, moved beside me, and took my hand. He didn't say anything to her. He didn't need to. His presence next to me was the loudest declaration there was. Paloma sat back down. The dress that had once made her the center of attention now seemed almost absurd. She didn't meet anyone's eyes. She didn't even stay through the reception. I heard later that she left through the back before the first dance. But her exit wasn't the end. The days that followed were quieter, but just as telling. Texts stopped. Friends she had rallied before the wedding now hesitated to reply. I got a message from Ash's cousin, Marianne, saying, "You handled that with more grace than I ever could have. You earned a lot of respect yesterday." There were calls from Ash's mother, shaky and embarrassed, offering apologies without saying the word. "I love you both," she said. "I always have. Even if I don't always say it right." Paloma tried one last play, something about distress and public humiliation. Sent Ash an email with veiled legal threats. But the lawyer replied with 3 attachments and a reminder that her signature, her presence, her behavior, and her role as legal proxy were all documented. We never heard from her again after that. Ash told me later that he had kept copies of everything. Not because he thought she'd go that far, but because she'd always been unpredictable. He said he hated that it had to be that way, but he was glad we had been prepared. I didn't say it then, but in my heart, I was too. Because when the storm came, I didn't just survive it. I stood up in the middle of it and reminded everyone, including myself, who I really was. I had more to lose than just pride. I had built a life with Ash out of trust, compromise, laughter over burnt pancakes and late-night documentaries. I wasn't going to let anyone reduce that to dollar signs. Not even family. And certainly not someone who had underestimated me so badly she forgot her own name was on the one document that could shut her up for good. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with a wax seal on the back. Paloma's handwriting. Slanted, delicate, overly formal like she was writing from a 19th century manner. My stomach dropped when I saw it in the mailbox. Ash was upstairs in the study. I didn't call him down right away. I sat on the porch, holding the letter in my lap like it might burn through the fabric of my jeans. Poppy lay curled at my feet, breathing slow and warm. The wind had a bite that day. Early fall, with the first yellowing leaves collecting at the corners of the steps. I stared at that envelope for at least half an hour. And then I opened it. It wasn't long. Just a page and a half. Typed, not handwritten, of course. "I suppose I owe you an apology, though I'm not sure what kind you'd accept. You embarrassed me, yes. But I embarrassed myself more. I've spent so long trying to be something I'm not, trying to preserve a legacy that isn't mine to control. I thought you were taking something from me. I see now you never were. I won't pretend I'm suddenly changed. That's not how growth works. But I won't get in the way again. Tell Ash I said, never mind. He knows. Do what I couldn't. Build something real. Peach." I read it 3 times. Then folded it carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and carried it upstairs. Ash was at his desk, glasses on, bent over some schematics. He looked up when I came in. "She wrote," I said. His expression didn't change much. Just a faint tightening at the corners of his mouth. "Do I want to know what it says?" "She said she won't get in the way anymore," I told him. "She said, we should build something real." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Stared out the window at the slope behind the house, where the wind was sending red leaves tumbling down the grass. "Maybe that's the closest she'll get to, I'm sorry," he murmured. "Maybe," I said. He didn't ask to read it. And I didn't offer. That was the strange thing about the whole aftermath, it wasn't about revenge. Not really. It wasn't even about justice. It was about space. About lines being drawn, acknowledged. About learning which ones to hold and which to let go of. Ash and I started talking more openly after that letter. Not just about Paloma, but about what we wanted going forward. Whether we'd move somewhere quieter someday, whether we wanted to have kids, whether the life we had was something we could keep building on or if we needed to shift direction. We had hard conversations. Some ended with us on opposite sides of the room. Some ended in laughter. All of them ended in connection. It was like the wedding had cracked something open, and now, nothing could go back to pretending. One night, we sat out on the porch again, same spot where I'd read her letter. The stars were out, The kind you only get in places where you can't hear traffic. He turned to me and said, "You know, I always thought love was supposed to be this sweeping, effortless thing. Like the world just pulls two people together." "And now?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. "Now I think love is choosing each other, even when there's every excuse not to." I didn't reply. I just reached for his hand. We sat in the dark for a long time. There were still ripples. Paloma was still out there, living her life in Seattle. We saw glimpses of it online, a new job title, an interview in some niche fashion magazine, an overly curated post about resilience. But she stayed away. And we stayed steady. Not perfect. Just steady. Let me know when you're ready for the story's final phase, the emotional resolution and what ultimately changes for them. We didn't speak for a while after she left. Not that evening, not over dinner. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable, just full. Like the air after a thunderstorm, when everything's been cleared out and you're not sure what's going to bloom next. Ash sat on the edge of our bed that night, still in the flannel he wore to split logs. His hands were resting on his knees, calloused, dusted with old pine bark. "She meant it," he said, finally. "I know," I replied. We lay in bed side by side, not touching, not talking, just listening to the old heater click on and the wind move around the house. I could feel something changing between us, not a rupture, not a fracture. More like the quiet expansion of trust. The kind that doesn't need words. The next few weeks passed slowly. Paloma didn't call. Didn't email. No cryptic posts, no drama. It was like she'd finally run out of energy for the performance. And strangely, her absence started to feel more natural than her presence ever had. December rolled in cold and early that year. Our town, Greenville, decorated the trees along Main Street with white lights. They lit the big snowflake over the bridge and brought out the hot cider carts on weekends. Ash and I bundled up and walked downtown some nights, watching couples take photos in front of the old courthouse, kids running around with mittens too big for their hands. Life was slow. Beautiful, in its way. One evening, a week before Christmas, I came home to find Ash in the kitchen, phone in one hand, 2 mugs of cider warming on the stove. "You'll never guess who called," he said, turning slightly. I didn't have to guess. Her. He nodded. "Just to say thank you. For listening. For not slamming the door." "And?" I asked. She didn't ask to come visit. Didn't hint. Just wanted to say it. That was it. He handed me a mug, and I leaned against the counter, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. "She's changing," I said quietly. He said, "But we don't need her to. Not for us to keep living." That hit me harder than I expected. Because for so long, Paloma's presence, or her disapproval, had been this invisible hand shaping everything. Every decision, every dinner, every hesitated word between us. But now, it felt like we had stepped out from under that. Not because she had changed. Because we had. Christmas came and went. Quiet. My parents came by for ham and mashed potatoes. We made cinnamon rolls from scratch on New Year's Day and nearly set off the smoke alarm when I forgot to set the timer. We laughed until we couldn't breathe. One snowy Sunday in January, Ash and I found ourselves back on the porch again, blankets wrapped around us, coffee cups steaming. It had become our place. A kind of unwritten journal between us, where the biggest shifts always found their way. "I've been thinking," he said, not looking at me. "About the guest room." "What about it?" "I want to turn it into something. A studio for you, maybe. Or a nursery someday. Something that belongs to us." That caught me off guard. We hadn't talked about kids in a while. Not seriously. After the wedding, everything had felt too fragile, too fresh. But I didn't flinch. I said. He nodded. I smiled, letting the idea unfold in my mind slowly, gently. Like opening a window after a long winter. "I like that," I said. He took my hand, warm and steady in mine. There were still things we hadn't figured out. Still scars we hadn't fully mapped. But the fear that used to live quietly between us, of things falling apart, of not being enough for each other, that fear had shrunk into something smaller. Manageable. Honest. And for the first time in a long time, the silence between us didn't feel like holding our breath. It felt like peace. The first real conversation I had with Paloma after everything happened wasn't planned. It was May. A warm, sticky Saturday when the trees had that late spring buzz, everything in bloom, bees humming like background music. Ash had gone out for groceries, and I was pulling weeds in the garden, trying to salvage what I could from last year's neglected beds. My hands were covered in soil, hair tied back, sweat gathering at the back of my neck. The phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway, thumb swiping up with a smear of dirt. Hello? There was a pause. Then a breath. It's Paloma. I stood slowly, not sure what to do with myself. I wiped my hand on my shirt, even though I wasn't about to write anything down. Hi. I wasn't sure if I should call. But I figured since I'd written, and you didn't throw it back in my face, maybe you wouldn't hang up. I'm not hanging up, I said. My voice surprised me. Steady. Not cold. Not warm. Just open. Another pause. I wanted to tell you something, she said. I went back to the house. Our old one. The one we grew up in. They've redone it. Painted the porch blue, tore out the apple tree. I wasn't sure what to say, so I didn't say anything. I used to think that place was haunted, she continued, voice quiet, almost like she was talking to herself. Not by ghosts. By all the things we never said. I sat on the edge of the porch, the phone pressed to my ear, the taste of earth and sun thick in the back of my throat. I kept trying to rewrite the story in my head, she said. Make it so I wasn't the villain. But I think I needed to finally admit that, maybe I was. Or at least, I played the part well. I closed my eyes. You were hurt, I said. That doesn't make it okay. But it makes it understandable. A long silence. I didn't expect you to say that. I didn't expect you to call. And just like that, something shifted. Nothing dramatic. No tearful reconciliation. But something softened between us. The distance stayed, but it no longer bristled with static. It was just space. I'm not trying to be your best friend, she said eventually. I just didn't want the last thing you remembered about me to be that. It wasn't, I said. Another breath. Lighter, this time. I'm glad. And then she hung up. I stared at the garden for a long time after. The rows of half-dead lettuce, the cracked clay pots I kept meaning to replace. Poppy lay sprawled in a patch of sun, twitching in a dream. When Ash came back, I told him. He didn't ask what we talked about. He just handed me a bunch of fresh basil and kissed my forehead like he always did. The rest of the day passed like normal. We grilled chicken on the deck, listened to an old Miles Davis record, shared a beer. The sky went pink and gold, and for once, I didn't feel like I was carrying someone else's memory. We didn't see Paloma that summer, but we heard things. Marnie said she'd been speaking at a few community centers, small talks about art and identity and rebuilding trust. One of the local papers published an interview with her. The tone was different. Less curated, more bare. I used to think love meant control, she'd said in the article. Now I think it means standing back and letting the people you care about be free, even if that means they walk away from you. Ash clipped the page and tucked it into a folder in his desk. He never said why. I didn't ask. We kept living. That fall, I opened a tiny gallery downtown. Just a shared space, but it meant something. People came in, asked questions, touched the clay with reverence like they knew how long it took to shape something out of chaos. Ash helped build the shelves. My mother cried when she saw it. My father just hugged me and said, "Told you you'd make something that lasted." Sometimes we'd sit outside the shop after closing, coffee cups in hand, watching the lights blink on down the street. I loved those nights. No drama. No hidden landmines. Just the kind of quiet that meant everything was, finally, okay. But even in peace, life doesn't stop. It keeps turning. And eventually, we were faced with a new decision. One we didn't expect. But that part of the story, that comes later. Let me know when you're ready to keep going. It was late October when the letter from the lawyer arrived. Not ours, Paloma's. Ash and I had just finished dinner, the first real soup of the season, the kind with slow-cooked broth and thick chunks of potato. The kind that sticks with you. The mail had been sitting on the counter, ignored until now, until the creamy envelope with embossed initials caught my eye. Ash opened it. Read it once. Then again, slower. What is it? I asked. He passed it to me wordlessly. Inside was an official notice. Paloma had amended the trust. It was the family trust their grandmother had set up decades ago, meant to provide for future generations. For years, Paloma had been the sole trustee, and while she hadn't misused it, she had certainly controlled it, using it to manipulate Ash, to assert power. But now, the letter said, she was stepping down. Naming Ash the new trustee. And not just that, she had added me to the beneficiary list. By name. I blinked. She didn't have to do this, I murmured. No, Ash said, folding the letter carefully. She didn't. It wasn't about the money. We were comfortable. Always had been. It was the gesture. The public acknowledgement of something she'd spent years trying to deny, that I wasn't some gold digger. That Ash had made his own choices. That we'd built this life together, brick by brick. She was giving up control. Finally. I don't know if it hurt her to do it. But I do know this, it couldn't have been easy. We didn't call her. Not right away. We didn't need to. The following month, her exhibit moved to a larger gallery in Portland. Ash and I went. Quietly. No press, no announcement. We walked the halls hand in hand, surrounded by her work, stark, beautiful portraits, some of strangers, some of family, one of Ash as a child, standing in a field of long grass. And at the very end, the final photo, a woman standing on a pier, back turned to the camera, the ocean stretching wide and empty in front of her. The title card read, Letting Go. We didn't see her that night. But we signed the guest book. I wrote, thank you. For seeing clearly. A week later, I got a package in the mail. Inside was a framed photo. Not from the gallery, but personal. A candid shot I didn't know existed, me and Ash laughing in the kitchen, flour on my nose, his hand mid-gesture like he'd just cracked a joke. On the back, a note in her handwriting, you built it anyway. No apology. No self-congratulations. Just that. And that was enough. The past didn't vanish. It didn't even fade. But it stopped defining the present. And slowly, that was the best kind of closure we could ask for. Paloma didn't become a regular part of our lives. But she stopped being a shadow. And that made all the difference. Ash and I kept living. Loving. Building. And every time I passed that photo on the hallway wall, I smiled. Because in the end, the best revenge wasn't the prenup. It wasn't the silence that followed. It was the life she tried to belittle, standing tall, undeniable, and completely out of her control.